Hello chess friends and welcome to Out of Chess channel and welcome back to the Meltwater Champions Chess Tour finals in 2022. We're now in the round 6 of this beautiful chess event and we're following now the derby of the day. We're following now the epic match between Ramesh Babu Praggnanandhaa and Magnus Carlsen. Before this round 6, Magnus has a comfortable lead. He has 4 points more than Jan-Krzysztof, which means now if Magnus wins now his game today against Praggu, he would be the winner of the Meltwater Champions Chess Tour finals because no one can catch up anymore with him. Although Magnus and Jan-Krzysztof have to play their match against each other tomorrow, but this would be a simply lead that you cannot catch up anymore. So it's now really critical moment of this super event. So let's check out now what happened. The game 1, we have to say they have to play 4 games. The game 1 between Praggu and Magnus Carlsen was already a spectacular round. Be prepared. This is simply beautiful chess. Again, really a great tactical battle. So here Praggu opened with the move e4. We have c6 by Magnus, the Caro-Kann defense. d4 occupying the center, d5 hitting the pawn on e4. e5 we have the advanced variation by Praggu, and now bishop to f5 with the idea to lock the center with the move e6, then to play c5 and then knight to c6. Praggu goes into the so-called Tal variation named after the great tactician Mikhail Tal. He's trying to get this idea f3 g4, maybe even to trap the bishop here on f5 with the move h5. In the continuation, Magnus blocks now the potential h5 move, and here after move bishop to d3, Praggu is forcing a trade of bishops, which I think is good for black because many times in these types of structures, look at this, when you play the move e6 like Magnus Carlsen did here, many times you have problems where to go with your light square bishop, and now mission accomplished. I think you traded off your light square bishop, which is a good thing. Many times you don't know where to go with these bishops. Now it's off the board, at least you traded off for a very powerful bishop of your opponent, the bishop on d3, so it's now really a solid line here that Magnus Carlsen played. So still you have chances for black here because you will play ideas of c5, knight to c6, queen to b6, so you will continue your powerful attack around the square d4. So in my opinion, already a good game here for black. Magnus already equalized the position with the black pieces, which is really incredible. We're in move 6 and the evaluation is already equal, so I think really good opening choice here by Magnus. So in the continuation, knight to f3, preparing kingside castling, we have queen to a5, knight from b to d2. This move stops a little bit the progress of the bishop. Now Magnus uses this moment. He plays now knight to h6. Notice that this knight is not attacked now by the bishop. We have now kingside castling, and now knight to f5. Magnus cements his knight on a very powerful square. This knight cannot be kicked away anymore by any pawns, any pieces, because you gave up in the beginning the bishop on d3. You traded off for the bishop on f5. Now the knight is coming in f5, and as I said, you could maybe try a wild idea, f3 g4 here, kicking with the knight, but then if you do that, then you leave also the g3 unprotected. So in my opinion, white should not touch anything here on the king side. The knight is simply too powerful now on f5. When we watch these other pieces, black's pieces are also solid because in the continuation c5 will happen for sure, and knight to c6. So here the pressure around the square d4 will be enormous. So it's now really tricky already, this line that Magnus Carlsen played here. Praggu has to now show his cards in this particular line. So here in the continuation, knight to b3, Praggu kicks away the queen, and now Magnus again plays a beautiful, subtle, quiet move, queen to b5. Forces basically a trade of queens. If you play now queen to b5, this wasn't played in the game. Look at this. After c takes b5, the rook will eventually come on c8, hitting the pawn on c2, and then with the move a6, you are creating a solid structure. You're supporting the opponent b5, and then in the later stage, you could try ideas of knight to d7, knight to b6, and also a very important outpost. Maybe you can create around the square c4. You would have a really nice dominant position around the square. So really tricky line that Magnus played here. Queen to b5. Here Praggu realized this positional problems after potential trades of queens. Plays now queen to d1, and now Magnus opens the center with the move c5. d takes c5, bishop to c5, a4, kicking away the queen, queen to c6, and now knight to c5, queen to c5, and now c3 here by Praggu. A very important move. Good choice here by Praggu because he's not allowing d4 to be played by Magnus. If d4 happens, then black could have really a space advantage in the center of the board. Would eventually play the move knight to c6, a rook to d8, and simply try to push the pawn even further. So that's why you have to play this kind of a prophylactic move, not allowing d4 to come. So in the continuation, we have now knight to c6, and maybe now a tiny little inaccuracy. I would call it really inaccuracy, because here Praggu has the chance maybe to prevent this idea with rook to d8. He has to control the d8 square, because if the rook comes on d8, then of course it's placed on the file where the queen is, and then d4 is coming for sure. So that's why here you have to make this kind of move. Praggu played rook to e1, allowed now Magnus to play rook to d8, bishop to g5 is coming, but now with rook to d7, Magnus gets out of the attack and still has this opportunity to push the pawn on d4. Really a good game here by Magnus. So the openings that he plays are really great. If you are studying maybe an opening and you see that Magnus is playing it and you want to have a preparation, I think you can use just his games, because they're so incredible. Look how he's playing the game. He stays with the king in the center, but he's preparing even to break in the center with the king in the center, which is really wild. It's not an often case that you see that black is preparing a breakthrough idea with such an endangered king here in the position. So in the continuation, we have rook to c1. Magnus opens the position with the move d4 immediately. Here we have b4. Praggu kicks away the queen. If you play c takes d4, okay, this move would come with a direct threat against the queen. But now after queen to b4, okay, you had your fun with one attack, but now the b2 is weak, the d4 is weak. We will eventually take it out, and now also white needs to get out with the queen, because the queen is already endangered by the activity of the rook on the d file. So that was all possible because Praggu didn't play bishop to g5 in the first place. Really wild line over here by Magnus Carlsen. So as I said, after move d4, we have b4, queen to b6, we have b3, and now d takes c3, hitting the queen. The queen has to escape, and now here Magnus escapes to e7. He has now a beautiful continuation. He has now the opportunity to jump with the knight on d5. And when the knight is coming on d5, this other knight is already on f5. This could be a really dominant position in the center of the board by both of these knights. And we have to say, these knights on d5 and f5 are so hard to kick away from there. So that's why very nice positional play by Magnus. Here after knight to e7, we have rook to c3 by Praggu. Although I think you have to play now bishop to e7. You have to get rid of at least one of these annoying knights. I call them annoying knights because you see now in the continuation how much tactical damage these knights can really make. After bishop to e7, here knight to e7, rook to e7, now you pick up here the pawn, and now after knight to d5, you can at least retreat to c2. You will play knight to g5. At least you are maybe even threatening some checkmates on h7. Basically, maybe in this scenario, it's even the best here for black, maybe to stay with the king in the center, not allowing some attacks by white against your king here on the king side. So this was the way to go. But again, I think Praggu missed his move with the bishop. Here he took rook to c3, kingside castling, again maybe bishop to e7, just get rid of it. After queen to c2, now this knight is coming into the game, and look at this. The knight on d5 is powerful. It comes with the tempo. You have to retreat. What to do? You see, you have to make a decision here. Really powerful these two knights are. In the continuation, we have now rook to c4, rook to c7, attacking now the rook. And again, a new maybe inaccuracy here by Praggu. He plays now the move knight to d2. He's protecting the rook, but it was simply time to play rook to c1. You have to compete on the file where you are better. That's the most important thing here to say. And after move knight to d2 that Praggu played, basically Praggu lost the battle on the file where he was much better, on the c file. Now after move knight to d2, Magnus continues simply with rook to c8, and look at this. Now rook to c1 is not a possibility anymore, because you would simply play here rook to c4. You cannot, of course, take with the queen. You have to play now with the knight, and with queen to d4, you get a powerful pin here on the c file. You have to step back with the queen on b3. Queen to e4 is going to happen. Your pawn on h4 is weak. The knights are still very dangerous in the center of the board, so it's a much better position already here for black. So that's why here after move rook to c7 was played. So here Praggu didn't play the move rook to c1. He realized his problems, that he made a mistake here on the c file. So he took finally the rook on c7. After rook to c7, the queen has to step back to d1, and now Magnus won the battle on the c file, which in the beginning Ramesh Babu Praggnanandhaa occupied, which is really wild how Magnus got out of this mess, and he has now the attack on the c file. Two powerful knights. The queen is very active, so it's now a much better continuation here for Magnus. So after move queen to d1, also the h5 pawn is hanging, but Magnus plays a counter attack. He attacks the knight on d2. He's attacking the pawn on h4, but also he's attacking now the pawn on a4. We have queen to h5, Magnus takes the pawn on a4, knight to e4, here played by Praggu. He's preparing maybe a dangerous knight to f6 move. But Magnus stays calm here. He plays now beautiful queen to b5. He's saying, like here, show me what you got. Show me your knight to f6 move. But because actually knight to f6, I think many of us would be tempted by this move. Many of us would play the move immediately without even calculating so much. But actually knight to f6 is not working here. Look what happens. You just pick up here with g takes f6. And there are, of course, two continuations. You can play e takes f6 or bishop to f6. Let's see now what happens if you play bishop to f6 and maybe you are threatening checkmate on h8. Then the continuation is simply this one, knight to f6. After e takes f6, again you're trying to get the queen somehow into the game. But look at this knight is protecting the square g7. Now you play just queen to a4, hitting the pawn on h4, and now you could maybe try the move g4, but now the problem is now with knight to d6, actually everything can be protected. You can maybe deliver here queen to h6, or maybe you can play even queen to g5 immediately, but the king can escape. That's now the most important thing. You can deliver a couple of checks, but now the king can hide. You cannot create any checks. The queen is controlling the d1 square. In the near future, this pawn will be taken. The rook will be included into the game. So this is not working. So let's go back. So as I said, after move knight to f6 and g takes f6, you could of course play here e takes f6. Maybe again you're trying to get the queen somehow into the game. But now look at this with knight to d6, queen to h6. Now you're playing just knight to e8, and you have a control of the g7 square, so no checkmates are going to happen. And again, you just include the rook into the game. You maybe trade it off more, get somehow the knight into the attack, and maybe even just start to push the pawns here on the queen side. So again, it's completely winning. So I think we have to solve really this position after move knight to f6, because I think really that many would be tempted by this move, but actually this tactic is not working. So here after move queen to b5, Praggu played rook to d1. We have a rook to d7, although here a better idea for Magnus is to play rook to c4, and rook to c4 is now creating really tactical damage. You can play queen to e2, but now after queen to a4, I think this game is almost over here for Praggu. The h4 pawn is weak. Again, we have these two connected passers on the a and b file. The knight is hanging. You have to make a reaction. So this was now simply a beautiful opportunity for Magnus Carlsen to win the game immediately. But now he played rook to d7, allows now here Praggu to go with queen to g4, and now this move knight to f6 makes a little bit more sense, because the g file could be opened, and then there are certain tactical threats on the g file. So that's why this would be a new opportunity here for Praggu. So that's why Magnus gets out of the attack. He plays now king to f8. We have queen to h5, trying even the checkmate here, or at least an annoying check on h8. Magnus steps back again to g8, and here Praggu was hoping for some perpetuals with the move queen to g4. But now Magnus makes a huge decision, and he makes an accuracy here. The only way to save somehow here this position and maybe stay active here is to play queen to b3. Because now after knight to f6, look at this. We can play knight to f6. You can play g takes f6, but look at this. The rook is hanging also on the d file. If you play, of course, a rook to d7, then we pick up here first the queen, and the game is over. So the problem here after queen to b3, that you are vulnerable around the square d1. So this was the chance by Magnus Carlsen to protect finally this potential knight to f6 move. That was the defensive move. But he played now knight to b6, and allowed basically here now Praggu finally to go with the move knight to f6. And knight to f6 actually leads into a drawish continuation, because you have to play now g takes f6. Now after bishop to d2, this would be the drawish line. This wasn't played in the game, so this was now the only chance for Praggu to make a draw all of this. Now king to h7, you're playing just a check against some perpetuals, and if the king steps back here to f8, then you have an annoying check with bishop to b4. So that's why black should never go to the queen side. And as we said, now after king to f8, bishop to b4, king to e8, you could get checkmated. So that's why you have to stay here on this side of the board. You have to play king to h7, king to g8, and this would be a draw. So this was the last chance here for Praggu. But instead of this move knight to f6, he played bishop to f6. This is really wild. And Magnus Carlsen realized now there are some tactical threats on the d file. This was the way to go. Now the queen gets deflected, and now Magnus brings now a new defender into the game. Knight to d7. Although g takes f6 leads now into complications, there are certain checks, and now with this one, probably this is again a draw. So that's why Magnus Carlsen sense now that here Praggo made a mistake. He's playing now knight to d7, gets new defender into the game. Now he's threatening to take out the bishop. We have now queen to c1, and now Magnus is simplifying the game by trading off the queens. Queen to f4, but now finally g takes f6, and this is now completely winning. We have e takes f6, king to h7, we have queen to g4. We have, even if we try, let's see, g4 here to kick away the knight, and h4 is weak, so it's not possible. Then we will eventually play knight to g6, and we play knight to f8, so everything is compact here in black's position. So this was simply too slow. After king to h7, here queen to g4 was played by Praggo. He's trying some annoying threats around the square g7, but now Magnus delivers one check, gets the queen into the defense. Really beautiful defensive moves. Now knight to g5, we have king to g8, knight to e6 by Praggo. Okay, you have again a beautiful check, but now Magnus finally covers everything. We have a queen to c4, Magnus picks up and now the knight on e6 and can cover with the queen. So nothing dramatically changed here, nothing special here. In the continuation, we have now queen to f5, knight to f6, and Magnus is defending now this position. He has now two connected pawns, a knight and the queen, that are protecting the king, and this is not working anymore. The attack by white is splashed. So we have now g4. Praggo tries some ideas. We have knight to d5, queen to g5, king to h7. No checks by the queen are possible. Here in the continuation, we have king to g1, and Magnus starts to push the pawns. We have now queen to d2, attacking now the pawn. We have now queen to e6, queen to a5, but now Magnus also picks up this one, gets the queen into the game. We have here queen to d8, we have knight to f4. Very important move here by Magnus. He's protecting now finally his pawn, and okay, maybe white is going to deliver a couple of checks, but nothing special, nothing can happen here, because the knight is always a good protector of the king. We have now queen to c7, Magnus goes forward, goes simply towards this pawn, is trying to trade off the queens, and in this position, Praggo resigned. So there is also the problem, if you don't react, of course, then you get checkmated here on h1, so you have to trade off the queens, and then it's a completely winning game here for black. So great game by Magnus Carlsen. But we have seen Praggo had some chances at least to make a draw, but how Magnus is playing really these openings, how he gets in an early stage with a good position, really incredible, especially in the Caro-Kann defense, which is really a solid game. But sometimes you get attacked by your opponent's spaces. Many times white has a dominant position in the center of the board. Magnus gets out of this with some great positional trades of pieces. Played very powerful with this knight. Great game here by the world champion. Incredible game it was for sure. So still nothing lost. Praggo has still three more games in order to improve himself. Maybe he can still make something out of this game against Magnus. It wouldn't be the first time, because in the past we know that Praggo won many times his games against Magnus Carlsen, but as a warm-up in the round one, really great game here by Magnus. So okay, I hope that you enjoyed the game. I really enjoyed it a lot. Interesting ideas of the Caro-Kann for sure. If you want to see more games that we have analyzed so far in this event, check out my coverage with some beautiful games played by Praggo, Magnus, Jan-Krzysztof, and many more. And if you like this content, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and chess is the best, of course.